suddenly you get a war and suddenly you can find billions of pounds that you couldn't before. Suddenly it's quite all right to sacrifice people, whereas before we had to stay indoors to save granny. And climate change. Nobody mentions climate change because war is the worst thing you can do for the planet. Worst thing you can do for pollution. It creates unbelievable amounts of pollution. Do we hear the Greens complaining? In Germany, they're fighting for war. The Greens actually want more war. Truth is like a cork. If you put a cork in water, you can push it down, but you have to keep pushing it down. The moment you take your finger off, it comes out, and I'm seeing truth come out. A lot of people think that you pay into national insurance and that goes into a savings pot for you for later on, and that pays your state pension. But it isn't like that. It's a Ponzi scheme. Right. So I put money into national insurance, I'm working, and that money immediately goes to pay the people who are currently retired. So it's money in, money immediately out. There is no pot. There's nothing. I'm very against assisted dying. When you put it into legislation, as they've done in Canada, yes, you immediately open the door for murder, essentially. Yeah. And in Canada, in my view, they have been murdering children, they've been murdering young people, saying, "Well, you're a bit unhappy. Would you like to kill yourself?" You'd be happier if you were dead, wouldn't you?
I'm really delighted to have with me today Jasmine Birtles. Now, Jasmine, you have so many different roles and different job titles. You're a money expert and you're also a humorist. You're also a TV presenter, reporter. You've had your own TV shows. I think you're on Homes Under the Hammer, mm-hmm, Inside Out as well for the BBC, mm-hmm, and you're regularly on GB News. And also you've done many other things as well, isn't it? You read English at University of Cambridge. Mm-hmm. How did you move from studying English to moving to become a financial expert or a money expert?
Yes, it's a zigzag track. My whole, what I laughingly call my career, has been a very zigzaggy way of going about. There's never been one particular thing I wanted to do. There's always been lots of things. So I've never had a job, nasty things jobs. Ugh, no. Always worked for myself, which is, up and down in itself. There are times you feast or famine much of the time. So I started off thinking, well, I'd like to do creative stuff. I'd like to do this. I knew I wanted to do comedy, and I had lots of comedian friends at university. They'd gone on to do stuff. But I also, I took part in a BBC competition for students to make a radio programme, and we won our section. So I thought, I want to do this, all sorts of things I wanted to do. So I just decided to go freelance, and I'll be a comedian and I'll write articles and I'll do radio, and I thought I'd try and get into telly as well. So that's what I did, and I was very poor for a couple of years. And then I sort of gradually honed things down. I realised at one point that I had to start thinking of myself as a business. And this is actually something I sometimes teach. I actually do workshops in how to be your own brand, because it just hit me suddenly that I was thinking myself as this poor little person going, "Oh, please give me work, oh, please." And I had to start thinking of myself like Coca-Cola or Amazon or Disney or whatever, and think like a big company and have all my different departments. So that's when I started to do that. Then I got business-like. And I did all sorts of things. I was doing comedy, and then I got into corporate entertaining because I realised that was where the money was. That was another thing, you sort of sniff out the money. You think, corporate entertaining, that sort of thing. So I used to do, I still occasionally do, what would you call them? Imposter acts, where I would turn up at an event as a PR girlie, hello, or he'd be American, the new sales and marketing director, so excited to be here. I have been French, I've been the Undersecretary of Employment for the European Commission, and have been Swedish too. And so I give a talk that sort of starts off normal and then goes a bit mad and ends up with lots of jokes about the top people, the C-suite. So I did that sort of thing. And then I did some acting, lost money doing acting, decided I wouldn't do that again. I wouldn't mind, but I was writing joke books at the time, so I was really working during the day and acting in the evening and this sort of touring production, lost money. And then I got called, this is around about 2000, I got called by the head of the business unit at the BBC saying, did I want to come and do some shifts, some radio shifts, and I needed the money, and I said, oh, you pay? And she said, yeah, we pay, you know. And she said, have you got a business background? I went, no. And she said, that's all right, because that's a nice thing about the BBC. You don't need to actually know anything to work there, you know, that's perfectly fine not having knowledge. So I went there and I nearly cancelled it actually, because I thought, oh, what am I doing this? But I thought, no, go, you know, you need the money, go and do it. And I loved it from the first day, loved it. And I'd already done some consumer journalism for You and Yours, and there was an Outlook, I think it was called Outlook on World Service. And so I sort of immediately went towards the personal finance side rather than the business side. And I'd been looking for a few years, I'd been looking for a focus, because I was always just freelance features journalist, you know, doing all sorts. I did magazine, newspapers and whatever, radio, and I was looking for a focus, and I would be sitting there reading stuff, learning on the job, really learning, and I got this light bulb moment where I thought, gosh, this money thing, it's actually not hard, it's just basically common sense. Much of it, not all, but much of it is common sense. So how come I'm in debt? Because at that point I was 10 grand in debt, and I thought, gosh, it's ridiculous, because I've had a good education, for goodness sake, and yet I'm in debt. And I thought, well, it's because nobody ever taught me, even though I had a allegedly good education, never got taught about money. My parents they didn't know, you know, they only knew basics. They didn't teach me anything, didn't learn anything at school or university. So sort of thrown out, given credit cards and go and enjoy yourself, sort of thing. So I decided then and there, A, I'd be paying off my debt within a year, and I did. And B, that I would make it my thing to make money funny, make money understandable to people like me who are lovies, you know, as you say, I did English, I mean, you know, just way with the fairies, really, you know. So I thought if I can explain it in a way that someone like me can understand and even be interested, then I'd really be getting somewhere.
I must add then, because your English credentials definitely came in handy, because you wrote 38 books, the last I checked, or possibly more now, and countless other things you've written as well, and you're a public speaker too. But it's interesting talking about the whole lack of education, financial education at school. I find the same thing, you know, as a teacher, that the children don't know anything or not taught anything about the real world, and particularly around financial education, you know, taxes, not that you want to frighten them yet, but energy bills, going to university and realizing that there's a potential of a huge debt and they might end up doing the wrong course. Yeah. No one's teaching them that they should perhaps look at apprenticeships where, you know, the company could actually pay for their university studies and they get paid as well a decent wage. So there's so little education, you know. I wish now I was taught more about gold, because I think, you know, gold has been the best at least, a very good investment, better than property, you know, if you look at the last 20 years and historically as well.
It's a very good point, isn't it? I mean, golly, there's so much to say about all of this. I mean, firstly, I think you're absolutely right that we need education, financial education in schools. I mean, sadly, we need education in all sorts of areas. I mean, I heard just the other day that they're introducing classes for little ones and how to brush their teeth. You know, much of the problem is that parents are not doing what they should be doing. Let's be honest, they should be doing a lot of this. And, you know, money management, frankly, should be taught by parents, but most parents don't know it themselves at the moment, so they can't. So yes, I think you're right that at least the basics, at least, you know, how to earn money, how to save it, how to spend it, taxes, as you say, and thinking compound interest. Now, if I was never that interested in maths lessons at schools, if they put a pound sign before it and said, this is your money, if you do this, in 20 years' time, it'll grow to this amount, I'd have got pound signs would have come up in my eyes and be like, yeah, oh, I'm interested in this. So yeah, there is a lot to be said for that. And when it comes to actual investments, as you say, it's learning. I think that the secret is learning to think long term and look long term as well, because so much of the time, not individuals and very much journalists think very short term. I mean, right at the moment, you've got lots of articles going, "Ooh, the stock market's all in jitters," or it's, everything's terrible. Well, that could blow over in a few weeks, few months, or even if it's just if it's a few years, it could be 2, 3, 4 years. In the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot, and it's very easy to get fixated on a particular thing. I mean, I've had lots of friends who've said, "Oh, I've only got property. I don't want a pension. I don't want," and I'm saying, "No, spread your money." And property, as you say, it's not looking that good, I think, in the short term or medium to long term, really. Gold, though, was very quiet for a long time. I wasn't interested in gold until about 5 or 6 years ago, and then it was sort of a philosophical interest as well as a financial interest that I had in gold.
What is the philosophical interest, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, gold is real money. Gold is money. Everything else is debt. That's JP Morgan who said that, and it's the material of freedom. The freedom movement is very into gold because it's, as I say, it's real money. The government can try to control it. Obviously, in America, they did control it back in early
Roosevelt time.
Yes, early 20th century. But it's portable. It's solid, and so it can take you out of the system, out of the matrix. So, and a lot of us who have sort of been waking up, as it were, to kind of what's going on and have been very unhappy about the general establishment narrative, have realised that fiat money, the pounds, dollars, euros, just normal money that we think of as money, has been massively devalued. I mean, to the nth degree. And really, a pound now is worth less than a penny, I think. From about certainly from 100 years ago, but it's worth very, very little compared to gold. So gold has been going up, or it looks like it's been going up, but really it's fiat money that has gone down. So in comparison, gold looks like it's going up. It's actually just staying as it is.
It can be such a misconception that when you look at it that way,
yes.
Isn't it? It's actually the devaluation of the fiat currency, the paper money.
Exactly. Apparently, in Roman times, you could buy, with an ounce of gold, you could buy everything you needed to dress properly. You could have your toga, your sandals, your bag, your whatever. And it's the same now. I mean, an ounce of gold now, troy ounce as they call it, roughly an ounce, is about, I think it's £2,800. Well, you could get a very nice suit for that,
yes.
And kit yourself out extremely well. So that kind of shows how gold has stayed the same. It's kept its value, whereas fiat currency doesn't.
So a very, very interesting point, yes. And I've heard people call it God's money as well, gold, or nature's money.
Nature's money, yes. Silver as well, to a lesser extent, but those two.
And there's a threat, of course, of the central bank digital currencies and digital ID, and they're proclaiming that this is all in the name of security for us, convenience, ease of transaction, so on and so forth. What would you say to people who parrot that narrative?
I think the road to hell is paved with convenience, and to me, and I've said this at a number of conferences, CBDCs are the devil's work. They are control to the max. Real CBDCs, the fundamental idea of CBDCs is that everything you earn and everything you spend is funneled through a central authority, whether it's a bank, whether it'll be government, something like that. And of course, with the technology that we have with AI, you can barely move, you can barely breathe or think really without them knowing. And certainly when it comes to them controlling what you're spending, knowing what you're earning, taking tax from it before you even see it, and then forcing you to spend on certain things, not spend on other things. It's a type of hell, I think. So I am fighting against it with every power that I have.
Yes, thank you. That's really reassuring. What should we do? What would you suggest to the ordinary citizen to do? to protect themselves and to
Yes.
stop this from happening, or at least postpone it as long as possible?
Well, I go back again to gold and silver. I think it's a good idea to own physical gold and silver, because that takes you out of the system. It means that you have something to use, something of value, something with which you can buy other stuff if needed. So that's a very good thing to have that. And I would, as I said, physical gold. You can have digital gold. I have some investments in digital gold products, but it's also a good idea to have physical gold. But also, and I think we need to learn this a lot more in this country, we just have to say no. Civil disobedience. And, we've seen this with a few things recently. People who are saying no, and it might just start with one person just standing out going, no, I'm not going to do that. And then somebody else goes, actually, no, I'm not going to either. And then somebody else goes, and then a whole load of people go, yeah, I'm not going to do that either. And we need more people realising that we can say no. We are sovereign citizens, and we can and we must say no where we need to.
Yes, I think the difficulty that people find is they're not spotting all the connections between all the different agendas. So they might pick one and say, I'm not going to do that, but then they'll fall into the trap of the other.
Yes, climate change is a
Yes.
particularly pernicious one, I think. Yes, and a lot of people, quite understandably, are very concerned. I think we're all conflating climate change with pollution, and there is a pollution problem, and we need to be concerned about that and bring that down. But climate change, is quite. I mean, climate change exists; it always has. For millennia, ever since there's been climate, climate changes. That's what it does. But it's quite clear that it's part of an agenda that's being put on us to control again. It's moved on from global warming. Global warming has been pushed to the side because there were enough scientists going, no, actually we're cooling. So it's been changed to something that you can't gainsay, the actual words themselves. If you say, I don't believe in climate change, then you're clearly a fool because, climate's change.
Yes.
But what it's supposed to mean is the problem. But I did a reel on Instagram just last week, which went viral, where I said that, isn't it funny? One of the things I was talking about, the Ukraine war, and suddenly you get a war, and suddenly you can find billions of pounds that you couldn't before. Suddenly it's quite all right to sacrifice people, whereas before we had to stay indoors to save Granny. And climate change, nobody mentions climate change because war is the worst thing you can do for the planet, worst thing you can do for pollution. It creates unbelievable amounts of pollution. Do we hear the Greens complaining? In Germany, they're fighting for war. The Greens actually want more war. So, it does rather show the hypocrisy of it, that this apparently huge, terrible thing that the whole planet's going to die in a minute completely is pushed aside when something a bit more interesting comes along, and the fact that everybody wants to go into Ukraine and blow each other up is pushing all of that aside. I'm sure they'll still make us drink from paper straws, even though we're blowing each other up, but
that's the irony of it. I also would really want to commend you, because one of the great things I admire about you and have done for the last 5 years is that you've been one of the very few journalists who have been outspoken against the COVID narrative. And I think what's also admirable is that you are a questioning person. And we often find, as a teacher myself, I see that children are being discouraged from questioning in very sort of devious ways. So they're not questioning, and they're just accepting what they're being told and being trained to do so. Where does your questioning mind come from? Were you always like this? Was it something that you were brought up with? Did you find that perhaps they did teach you how to question things at school, or was this something inherent in you?
It's a mix. Certainly my mother brought me up to question, because she was very aware that she hadn't been brought up to question. She'd been brought up to just accept and acquiesce and do what she was supposed to do, and got married, had children, was bored rigid, and she always said to me, question. I was brought up in a religion that questions, that goes against the river, goes against the grain. So I'm used to being different in that sense. So that's helped. But to be fair, I think I didn't question enough myself until just a few years ago. It was actually before COVID, about a year or so before COVID, I'd started to be aware of, well, surveillance and the digital prisons that we're gradually being put into. I mean, as you know, anything that has smart in the name is prison. They're just surveillance. I think it stands for surveillance and monitoring something technology. I can't remember, but that's, you know, it doesn't mean smart. It means surveillance and watching. And I was actually doing some research for a book I was going to write about our surveillance state, but things were moving so fast, you know, it was faster than I could get it down into a book. And then COVID happened, so I was already sort of aware of some really dodgy things, sort of rails being put down to imprison us in various different ways, so mentally and physically, but particularly mentally.
Yes.
So then COVID happened, and quite obviously stupid and bad things happening, you know, with the same phrases, same words and phrases being used across the world, or at least across the West, in TV stations around the place and in all the newspapers. Friends of mine and I couldn't get stories printed about, you know, going against the narrative, and we were all thinking, hello, you know, there were so many flags, so many dodgy things that I just sort of sat back and thought, something wrong's happening here, there's something very dodgy. Whereas before, I was very much, as you mentioned, I was very much part of the establishment, very much so, you know, I was a good girl, did all the things you're supposed to do, well, a lot of them I suppose, you know, and working for all these sort of establishment names. And then I had a choice, really, like everybody, I had a choice. I could either sort of ignore what I was thinking and just sort of carry on with the same track and potentially get work in establishment organisations still, or I could say, no, I'm going to stand with what I think is the truth.
Yes, that's really, really powerful, because I think in your field as well, you know, looking at all the different newspapers, the different mainstream media outlets, it was so rare to find anyone speaking for how certainly I felt. I said I could count the number of people on my fingers who were saying, no, this is not right. It was really, really quite concerning. It was like walking around in the Twilight Zone or the Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
I kept saying that, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. People that you thought were really very intelligent. And I was thinking about people I was at university with who would say, oh, I'm so glad I've got the vaccine. Aren't we marvellous? We're in a marvellous state. And I'm just thinking, what are you? You're all mad. Whereas taxi drivers would be saying, oh, no, that was obviously stupid. You know, builders wouldn't have it, plumbers weren't having it. And I thought, it's a different type of intelligence. It's a willingness to think your own thoughts.
Yes.
Also, actually, not watching television very much helps. I actually don't have a television myself. I mean, I work in it, but I don't have one. I watch it on my laptop sometimes. But that I think helped to stop me being completely focused on the wrong idea and being hypnotised, because it was a mass hypnosis and still is, I think.
Yes, very much so. We can see the reactions of people even now, and you know, what we've experienced. I mean, I would also wanted to touch on the financial side of things, because I read something written by a gentleman called Simon Elmer, who's been a critic of the COVID era, really, the whole narrative. And he made an interesting point. He thought that, you know, they said the lockdown was to protect us from a virus. He said it was more like protecting the amount of the $12 trillion that all the central banks were pumping in to save the collapsing financial institutions and shutting us down, you know, the real economy, all the business transactions, small businesses, and consumers from actually buying goods other than, you know, the selected places where they were allowing us to. It was just to insulate us from all of that, which would have caused a real economic disaster and something like a German hyperinflation from the 1920s, I was told.
We still could have that. You know, they're still pumping money in. I think money is metaphysical. It works. Well, at least fiat currency works. Anything, any form of money works depending on how much we believe in it. I mean, gold has no inherent value. It's only the value that we all give to it. It's solid and it's pretty, but we could choose rock. We could choose all sorts of things. But as I say, I am very concerned about the devaluation of fiat currency. And if I am, then certainly the central bankers are. So something is going to happen. I don't know when, but I don't by any means think we're out of the woods. But I agree with you that there was a big shift of wealth to the billionaires. A lot of billionaires, makes you feel warm and fuzzy, that whole load of billionaires made loads more billions during COVID, and loads and loads of small businesses just went to the wall. And we saw this, the nonsense of churches and schools being closed down while pubs were allowed to be open. And pubs have had problems as well, but the whole way of operating was just entirely wrong. There's companies like Netflix and Deliveroo, etc., doing marvellously well in there, but little businesses just destroyed, and that was just evil.
It seemed like an attack on that group of people, on independence initially. Let's attack independence, and let's bring everyone into line. When they then are becoming desperate, then they'll look to some kind of saviour, messiah figures. Sadly, that's often the government for handouts, for possibly this UBI in the future. And furlough was terrible, because furlough seemed to me,
free
please
money.
tell me, and it seemed to say, we're going to mortgage the future labour of generations to come. Leave them all in debt.
Exactly.
To pay for these banks that we've actually bailed out ourselves. It's evil, isn't it?
It is. It's just shocking. I don't know why more young people haven't taken to the streets and really protested, because it's their future that is, as you say, being mortgaged, and it's so wrong. And we are reaping the rewards, so many evil rewards of lockdown and, as you say, of furlough, etc. Right now, it's almost impossible to get certainly civil servants back into the office, because they've realised that they can get away with sitting at home watching telly and pretending to work. Loads of people are doing that. Now, I'm not against working from home, because my website, Money Magpie, my team all work from home. I've got some in Sussex, got some in York, I'm in London, I've got some in other parts of the country. And, it works well. But I've been through a lot of people who couldn't do that. You have to find the right people who are honest, hardworking, goal-oriented, and okay, I can just leave them to it, And also the sort of work that you do has to be the sort of work that works in that way, and just sort of filling in forms and doing that sort of thing doesn't work, because you can't monitor it. If you're doing something where there are actual outcomes, then you can monitor it via the outcomes. So I'm not against it, but for a lot of people, it's been very bad. We've had really low productivity in this country for years, and the whole sort of work from home culture has made it way worse. So I'm not surprised that quite a few big names like Larry Fink, I think it was, really he swore about work from home and said everybody's got to get back in the office, and they do. It's better for society much of the time, certainly for young people. You can get, meet your partner, socialise it. That's part of it. Yes,
friendships.
But also, I was in Milan a couple of weeks ago, and somebody who was running the hotel I was in said that since COVID, he's noticed quite a lot of bad behaviour, just sort of people not caring. He said they break things in the hotel and don't mention anything. And I mean, it could be just his perception, but I think I do feel that there's a sense of anger. People are kind of deliberately don't care, because they realise, whether they realise consciously or unconsciously, that they had really bad behaviour from their governments and from those that we're supposed to be looking up to. And I think it's a bit like seeing your parents behaving badly. You think, oh, well, if they're behaving badly, I can as well. I just get that feeling that there's that sort of sense. And certainly there's a lot of anger around and certain desperation now post-lockdown. And it's going to take many years, I think, to get that out of the system.
Yes, and also the effects, I think a lot of people are clearly also suffering from the health effects of having hospitals shut, treatments delayed. We're hearing so much more evidence now about the harms that the jabs have caused, the COVID jabs. We're also learning more about the alleged first wave of the COVID, that it could have been a cover for, killing elderly people in the care homes using this terrible cocktail of drugs, midazolam and morphine. And now, with that precedent already past us, assisted dying bill coming through as well, being steamrolled actually, with very little safeguarding as well. That is really a recipe for disaster.
It really is. My aunt was killed by the Liverpool pathway.
I'm so sorry to hear.
And they didn't tell us until afterwards. They said, well, we did put her on the Liverpool pathway. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what was that? And it's not good. They basically starve them to death. So they give them no food, no water. So this idea of, oh, it's an easy way out. No, it isn't. It's very unpleasant, very, very nasty. And I'm very against assisted dying. I mean, I see the arguments, and so certain people say, but, if I had this, that and the other, I would want to have assisted dying. Well, that's up to them, really. But when you put it into legislation, as they've done in Canada, you immediately open the door for murder, essentially. And in Canada, in my view, they have been murdering children, they've been murdering young people, saying, well, you're a bit unhappy. Would you like to kill yourself? You'd be happier if you were dead, wouldn't you? And they have already killed, in my view, tens, I can't remember how many, it's thousands, because they've got the same population number as California, and I think California had about 50 killing themselves, and they had something like 500 or 5. I can't remember what it was, but it was a huge difference in Canada. So once you open the door, that's it. It's very difficult to close it again, and it's so easily abused. As I say, it's already happening. Frankly, I mean, if you go into geriatric wards in hospitals, you can see that people are being edged out. They really are. But if you put it into the legal framework that they want to, then it's going to be, times 1,000, I think.
Yeah, as I said, I think it's bad enough currently with all the legislation to protect the vulnerable, but it's still being horrendous, especially with lockdown, because no one was allowed to visit the care homes.
Evil.
Temporary coronavirus legislation was brought in. We say temporary, but it's still effectively still there. And doctors were not able to come and actually see the patient, so authorizations to put people on end of life were given without really any scrutiny. And that's really worrying if that's happened within the current framework of legislation. Imagine if that bill passes, really. It just opens the doors even more. And then you see all the other things that are going on. For example, a lot of the cuts to benefits as well for people who are unwell. It just seems like a recipe for disaster, and they all seem to be quite connected.
Well, I think on the other side, if I were a legislator, I would, and this is something I talk about quite a lot on social media and in the Money Magpie as well, is that in the West, we are top heavy. As you know, we're top heavy with old people. We're not producing children. I'm part of that. I'm sorry about that. I feel I haven't done my duty. I should have produced lots of children. So we are, because of our benefit system, and particularly the benefits to older people, many of the Western countries, and we're not the worst, many of Western countries are facing bankruptcy. I mean, part of the argument for immigration is that we need more and more working people to work and pay their national insurance in order for the older people to be paid. Because most people, it took me a long time to realise this, a lot of people think that you pay into national insurance and that goes into a savings pot for you for later on, and that pays your state pension. But it isn't like that. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
So I put money into national insurance. I'm working, and that money immediately goes to pay the people who are currently retired. So it's money in, money immediately out. There is no pot. There's nothing. So when I come to retire, I'm going to have to hope that there are enough people working at that time and paying their national insurance so that I can get their money
By that
and
time.
then, by that time. So as I say, it's a Ponzi scheme. So that means that you need to have a certain number of you need a lot more working people than you have retired people. And all of our countries in the West are pretty much past that point now. We've got so many older people, even though in this country we've increased the age at which you are allowed to take your state pension. In other countries they haven't, but then they tried. In France they tried, and that destroyed the whole government. I mean, they don't have a functioning government at the moment because they tried to improve things with the retirement and a few other benefits elements. Italy is basically bankrupt because of it. Greece is bankrupt because of it. Portugal, Spain, all these places. America even is having horrendous times. Japan has probably the worst imbalance of old to young. Australia,
one child, isn't it, per family?
Yes,
I think
even China, because of the one-child policy, they're facing problems. So, there are various things that you can do. You can either really change the way the state pension is run and maybe make it just for certain people who are very poor and other people not. You could put the rate right up to sort of 80. You can't have it until you're 80 or something like that. Or you can kill off the older people. So, I wouldn't put it past.
Yes, judging from the last 5 years, sadly.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to people now who are thinking about, putting money then into, state pension, but then maybe looking to private pension options? Is that a good way to go?
Yeah, well, I've always said this. From the moment, let's see, 25 years I've been doing this, I've always said, just assume that the state pension won't be there. Just ignore it. Pretend it's not there. You have to sort yourself out. And, ultimately, that is, self-reliance is the best way to go, really. And if the state pension is there when you come to retire, well, great, that's an extra bonus, but only think of it as a bonus. So if we can all think in terms of setting up our own retirement fund, which could or could not include pension. I mean, there are a lot of good aspects to pensions, the tax benefits particularly. But you've mentioned gold, you could put some in gold. There are ISAs, of course, that we have in this country, IRAs in America. I would max out those, put as much as you can. Property if you can afford it, but I'm not sure about property, to be honest.
Nowadays, isn't it?
Yes.
As a landlord, small landlord, they're really hitting you hard, aren't they?
Yes, they are. So maybe buy, if you can afford it, hopefully you can afford it, buy your own home. If you can't, I wouldn't be too concerned, because there are a lot of other types of investments that you can use. And, in countries like Germany, for example, very few people actually own. It's a sort of different wages. So as long as you have investments, then, that's much better.
Maybe a nice, vaster portfolio, isn't it?
Exactly.
Spread across.
Always spread your bets. That's always, when I do money management courses, when it comes to investing, I always say rule number one is spread your bets. Diversify, that's the clever word for it. But I just think spread your bets. Never put all your eggs in one basket, ever.
That's really helpful. Any other top tips for youngsters coming out, let's say, of school and college and looking ahead, who are going to go out into this very uncertain world, this very uncertain future?
Well, there are a few things. Firstly, wake up and stay awake. Don't trust everything the government says. In fact, I say don't trust much of it at all. Don't trust, question all the time. Do your own research. I would also say learn as much as you can about AI. You need to learn, understand your enemy, because AI, when it comes to youth and making money, it is the enemy, really. So you have to see how you can use it to your own advantage. I think it's quite useful to become, I don't know if it's coding is the word, I don't know really, an AI developer. I don't know if that means coding or what it means now. So that's a useful thing. But also, I would say, I mean, I remember when I was at school, the one thing I wanted to do was go to university. And I wanted to go to one of the Oxford universities. It was a big thing. Now, if I were that age, as you say, I would be thinking in terms of an apprenticeship. I would be thinking in terms of setting up my own business early on. I really wouldn't be thinking about university now. It's a sad thing in a way to say, but you know, for some people, but not for many, I would say. So I wouldn't be doing that. I would be thinking in terms of hands-on businesses, that sort of thing, you know, plumbing, making things, nursing, the sort of things that AI probably can't get into, then that would be more the thing.
It'd be a bit more creative as well, I think, isn't it? To sort of cause AI to malfunction somewhere.
Yes,
put
absolutely.
a glitch in the system.
Yes, work out ways to put a glitch in the system, definitely.
That's great.
And do think for yourself. This I think is the most important thing now. We need to be willing to think for ourselves. And this again is why I've set up a Substack with some other angry journalists. We set up something called News Uncut. It's on Substack. Because we couldn't get articles in the mainstream media. There were things, big stories. I mean, you mentioned Midazolam, you know, these kind of genuine stories which in a normal functioning society, functioning media landscape would be front page news, and they were absolutely rejected totally. So we've set up News Uncut. It's a free Substack. We post when we can about, you know, the sort of things that are not getting in the mainstream media. And I would say do that sort of thing, you know, work for what you genuinely believe in. Don't just go along with the establishment.
It's very, very powerful, because I spoke to Mike Stock, I mentioned earlier, of Stock, Aitken and Waterman fame, and he said the same thing, even though, you know, he comes from a field of music, and it could be encouraging people to take up singing, but he said, no, we need plumbers, electricians, people who can repair boilers, you know, and other skilled work, carpenters, so forth. We really don't have many people going into those areas now. And so people are not having the skills, and therefore if they don't have the skills, they're going to turn to government to or depend on others to do everything for them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
One last point I know is slightly off a different direction, just about the inheritance tax, because I was looking at that now with the new laws that have come there, and they're saying, you know, if you've got a property worth £1 million, which in London's not very much nowadays, and you want to leave it to your children or other, you know, relatives, you have to pay, I think, is it £200,000 you'd have to fork out if sadly someone passed away on £1 million house. And are there any ways around it that you might know of? Like I've heard of this 7-year rule that people talk about. You have to leave a will, isn't it, and not die then for 7 years.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
true? Well, you sort of you can give away. I mean, if you've got several million, you could give away £1 million now to your kids, your grandkids, or whoever you want to, and so long as you stay alive for 7 years, then they won't have to pay any tax on it. So, you know, you have to go, I'm going to hang on, just...
Don't tell AI.
Yeah, exactly. So you can do that. There are also trusts, which are complicated things. I occasionally write about trusts, but I always say go and speak to a specialist, speak to a lawyer, and probably a lawyer and a financial advisor, because they are, as I say, they're complicated, and also they can, if they're not done right, they can actually sort of imprison you in something that you made a decision on then, and then things might change before you do pass on. In fact, there's a court case going on with Rupert Murdoch and his family over what he put in a family trust, and he wants to change. He's changed his mind, and so it's just something to be very careful of, but it can be a very good way of mitigating tax.
And just about the future then, are you fairly optimistic?
I'm always optimistic. Yes, ultimately good does win. Truth, it does come out. Truth is like a cork. You know, if you put a cork in water, you can push it down, but you have to keep pushing it down. The moment you take your finger off, it comes out, and I'm seeing truth come out all over the place.
Yes.
It's like whack-a-mole. It was like whack-a-mole before with the bad stuff, and now truth is coming out all over the place, and I'm seeing people wake up all over the place. So we're in a time of revelation, and it's a good revelation. It might be tricky, it might be sort of unpleasant going through it, but it's revealing good.
That's really reassuring, yes. I'm jumping back to one other quick question which I wanted to ask, because someone asked me to ask about what exactly, someone gave me a really nice analogy, and I just wanted to see what you thought, and it's about inflation, and they were saying it's something like this: if you've got 100 apples in a society and you've got £100 in that particular society, in that economy, if you then start to add more money, as we've seen, I think they call it quantitative easing,
Yes,
isn't it? Just printing more money.
Yes.
You put £200 into that economy, you still only got 100 apples because they haven't been able to produce for the new season. You're then going to, you're devaluing that money as well.
Yes.
You can only now possibly buy half an apple if someone's going to sell the half an apple to you. And also that means that the prices of the apples are likely to go up.
Yes, that's what we've seen with house prices, really, and the stock market, frankly. So the more money you put into the system, the more people can pay for things, so
Yes.
the more they do. So as you say, your 100 apples with £100 is £1 an apple. If you print another £100, you've got £200 around, so the apple sellers go, it's £2 now, yes, £2, and then it's £3. And so as you say, your pound will only buy half an apple now.
And that's what they've been doing, isn't it? Not just through COVID, but even before that, isn't it? From the 2008-9 crash.
Yes.
And this has just
exactly.
been continuing. So, I mean, this sounds really scary, because it sounds like we're on a terrible downward trajectory.
Hence CBDCs,
Yeah.
yes.
But they haven't pulled it yet somehow.
Not yet, no.
What do you think they're waiting for? Where do they want to get us to pull it? Do they want to destroy? They keep saying this, but someone's been telling me it's something to do with maybe destroying more of the middle class.
That does seem to be the trajectory, is destroying the middle class, definitely. And as you say, UBI, Universal Basic Income, they're trying to bring that in to basically just shut people up, sort of keep people in their homes. Bread and circuses, as they say.
Doing what, isn't it?
Well,
That's
yes,
the worrying
exactly.
thing.
Doing what?
De-skilled.
Who's going to pay for it? Yes. But there's the technology. We need to get the technology right, and I think we're quite some way from getting the technology right, getting the rails there.
Yes.
So there's that issue. But also there are a lot of people like us who don't want it, who simply don't want it. So politically, there's going to be a huge amount of pushback. There's also, we're coming into a multipolar world. I mean, at the moment, we've got the American dollar that's, the main currency. Before that, it was the pound. Before that, I think it was the franc. And now it looks like we're coming to gradually sort of chugging towards the end of the dollar dominance. But there doesn't seem to be another fiat currency that's going to take it over. And I know there are discussions between the BRICS countries. There are discussions in Africa. There are discussions all over about creating a new, quite separate currency, possibly gold-backed, possibly not, don't know. So that it's all kind of up in the air, I think, at the moment. There doesn't seem to be one central authority that's saying, right, this is what we're going to do, So I wouldn't say it's necessarily all to play for, but I don't think anything is really definite when it comes to currency. I find it very fascinating. It's a weird thing. I wouldn't have thought 10 years ago that I said, currency, let's talk about that, how interesting. But now I really do, I just do find it I'm very interested in the history of it, and coming off the gold standard in America in the 70s, and what that did. When we came off the gold standard, that meant we could print more, and here we are.
That's what fiat is, isn't it?
Yes.
So by decree, I think it means something like
yes.
that. Yeah.
So a fiat is a decree. Yes.
Latin word, I
yes.
think. Beautiful word.
Yes.
That doesn't have a very good meaning in
Not
everyday lives. No.
No, not now. Yeah.
Jasmine, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I've learned so much just talking to you. Like you said, we're going into this new area now of currency, and I find that also the history of it, and gold, very interesting. Maybe we'll talk about that another time.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.